Okay, let's get started. We have an hour here with Paul Comfort, and we're excited to get some dialogue going. Again, I'm Alex Bond. I'm the director of the Center for Transportation Leadership here at the Eno Center. Most of you on the line are graduates of our programs, considering this is our Eno Alumni Webinar Series. First one we've had in a while, and we're going to be doing these hopefully quarterly, at least several times a year. And it's a chance for you to revisit some of the topics that you discussed in our classes and also try out new ideas you've been encountering when you're back at the office. Happy to hear your ideas for other types of webinars you'd like to see, so please email us and let us know. Today, though, we have an excellent speaker, someone who's we're bringing a broad experience, and Paul Comfort. You can see him on the screen, I think. So you can't see me, you can see Paul. That's all right. Paul is the Vice President of Business Development for Trapeze Group, a software company. He'll tell you a bit about that in his career discussion. Paul came to Trapeze, where he was before as CEO of the Maryland Transit Administration, leading several modes of transportation or transit in Maryland, including in Baltimore. Before that, he had a couple of stints as a county manager in counties in Maryland and as a former elected official, former county commissioner. So a very unique perspective. Paul's going to tell us a little bit about bending the bureaucracy after he does his long bio here in the career lessons part. So Paul, please take it away. Oh, before we go, make sure you type your questions into the chat box. There's a questions and a chat section. Give them away. We will go to those at the end of the webinar, and if necessary, we will work the problem. So, okay, Paul,
Great.
Please.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you, Carolyn Dorff, who's helping to produce all this, and Karen Price and Robert Puentes, the head of the Eno Foundation here. A great group. I know you all know that since most of you are alumni, but one of the real honest brokers in the business, who I think plays a unique role, and I'm looking forward to continuing my relationship now with Eno. So I'm Paul Comfort. I looked through the attendee list. I don't know a lot of you, so that's fun to get to meet new people. I'm a people person. And it's kind of how I got started. They want me to talk about my background and career. I was just telling Alex, you know, my dad was a minister, so his job was to try to help people, and that's kind of been ingrained in me as a child, is to try to make a difference for good in the world. And so I got real involved in politics at a young age. Ran my brother's campaign for House of Delegates when I was 16, because I wasn't old enough to run, so I talked him into running. And then as soon as I could, I ran for office. You can see there on the left, when I was a junior in college at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, I ran for county commissioner and central committee. I won for central committee, but I think people thought maybe I was a little too young to be county commissioner. But it got me going, and it's kind of funny. Every time I've run for office, I've run 3 times. A third time was a charm, but it all worked out great. It's one of those deals where I met a guy, you know. So I met a guy while running for office who was the head of the Department of Aging in my home county, Queen Anne's County. And he said, Paul, we're starting a new transportation office. We got some vans to take people to the senior centers. We don't have anybody to head that up. Once you graduate with your bachelor's, why don't you come over and help us do it? I said, you know, I want to be in government. That's why I ran for, and I really am a strong believer in local government where the rubber really hits the road. And so I did. So I started as the county's first transportation coordinator with the Department of Aging in Queen Anne's County. And Irving Pinder was my boss, a great guy. And then I did that for 7 years, and the county commissioners asked me to start a public transit system, and I stole the name from Baltimore County. I asked them if I could use it. They said, yeah. So we called it County Ride. It was the county's first bus system, and we actually, you know, built it from scratch. There I am putting up a bus stop sign personally with a guy from the Public Works Department, you know, in his truck right beside me. So we figured out the routes. We planned the routes for the county, and we did kind of an inter-county thing, Queen Anne's County and the Eastern Shore. We connected in with Chestertown to the north of us and Easton to the south of us, and created a shopping network for people and tied it into our senior centers, et cetera, and really built it. One of the cool things that was fun during that time was we have an area in the county called the Kent Narrows, and there was at the time a lot of outlet stores there. Now they've moved to Queenstown. But I wanted to do a weekend shore hopper shuttle. But the commissioners did not have the money in the local budget to fund the operating portion to match the state grants for operating dollars. So I asked them, can I raise the money? And they said, sure. So I went out and got 50 businesses to donate money to match the operating grant we got, and that's how we got it going. We had T-shirts and did a lot of cool stuff and had all kinds of neat things we did with it. And I think that largely led to me getting this award in 1991 from CTAA as the Transit System of the Year. And of course, when you get something like that, it always leads to something else. And so shortly thereafter, I got a call from the private sector. It was a company called Mayflower, and then they became Laidlaw. They got bought. And this was a private company that managed city transit systems, very similar to actually, they got bought by First Group and became part of First Transit. And so you can see me there with my son. This is what I did for 7 years. I went around, stood in trade show booths, and bid on contracts all over the country, from literally from Microsoft, where I won the contract to run their first campus shuttle, where we had 45 minivans. And if you were working at Microsoft, you're making big money even back then, 6 figures, and they don't want them wasting their time going to get their car in the parking lot, driving to another building on their 2-mile campus in Redmond, Washington. They wanted the ability to push a button on their phone and have a minivan at the front door. So when you walk out, you get in, it takes you. It was kind of like Uber back then, and we did it. We set it up. It worked great, and now it's grown for MV, who still has the contract, to a $20 million a year contract. But anyway, I did that all the way to the Virgin Islands, where I won a contract to run Vitran, and most 25 states in between won contracts to operate them, and really learned the nuts and bolts, because back then the BD guys, the business development guys, actually did the bid models. Now they have specialists that do the pricing, but we had to learn how to do that. And so we went out and found the garages. We had to identify, while standing at these booths, we identified potential general manager candidates at the conferences. I went to every state transit show from Maine to Florida multiple times, and we would learn to, hang out and interact with people and say, this guy'd be a good candidate for, I'm bidding the New Jersey Transit contract, Region 7, you want to be my GM candidate, and those kind of things. Then I went to work for Mark Joseph, who owned Yellow Transportation in Baltimore. He asked me to be vice president of national contracts to help him take his company national, which we did. We won contracts in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Virginia, et cetera. And then they asked me to take over their operations in Central Maryland, where I had 10 contracts. We ran public transit, school bus, commuter bus. We won a bunch of contracts while we were there, paratransit. There's me with the shop guys, with Jerry Kreger, my all-time good shop manager. Then I decided I wanted to get back into public office, so I ran for state attorney in 2002. And there's a couple of my boys with one of their friends helped me put up signs, and it was a great experience. I lost, but again, I met a bunch of guys who were running for county commissioner and who won, and they said, they did a nationwide search, and they said, we haven't found anybody better than you. So I became county administrator and CEO of the county government, Queen Anne's, did that for a few years, 4 years actually. And then Charles became president of the state County Administrators Association, and met a bunch of people who then invited me to apply to a much larger county south of D.C., Charles County. I became their county administrator and was very active with economic development. There I am with our economic development director and one of the commissioners, Gary Hodge, who's been very involved in transportation issues. We went to the Paris Air Show and recruited 6 European defense contractors to come be in our military in Indian Head, where we're going to do a base there, a business park, a base business park. Then I left there and practiced law for a while, consulted, and ended up with MV Transportation in D.C. for 5 years, the longest 5 years of my life. People think WMATA stands for Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. We used to say it stood for We Meet and Talk a Lot. and we did. But it was, I learned a lot, again, ground level stuff. We had 12 general managers who ran garages who reported to me for the first few years. And then I took over operation of our call center, the 4th largest paratransit system in America with about 9,000 trips a day. And I learned Trapeze software really good. So it kind of came in handy later on because that's what we were using, the fast software. Then third time I ran for office. I had to get out of there, man. So I ran for county commissioner in my home county and won, was top vote getter. There's me and some of my family walking in a parade, lots of walking, talking. And so I went for county commissioner, and I made friends with a guy that was running for governor, Larry Hogan, who I'd known for a long time. Made better friends with him. There's me with the other commissioners. And after I won, I made 6 promises, and I was in office for 6 months. And I did all 6 of them. The best one being kill the beach parking permit fee. The previous commissioners had put in a fee. You had to pay to park at the beach. I thought it was ridiculous. It's a crappy idea. Those beaches were already paid for by program open space funds, and so I had it killed on the first day and pulled the signs out personally. And and then Governor Hogan asked me if I would become the MTA administrator in Baltimore. He said, Paul, you've run big county governments. You've had 25 years in transportation, and you're a little bit of a politician. The perfect kind of guy to run our transit authority in Maryland. So I did that for a while. Here's a picture of me with Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake and the rest of the folks at their operations center right after Hurricane or Jonas. Remember the winter storm Jonas? That was kind of our claim to fame, actually. We were able to, I work with Paul Wiedefeld at WMATA, and we kind of coordinated our efforts and the response time. And we shut down the service ahead of time. The first time Washington Metro had ever done that, the fourth time we had done it, we hid all of our trains underground so they wouldn't have lots of snow on them. We did all kinds of things. We did it as a group, and then we were able to recover within 96 hours from the worst snowstorm in Maryland's history with one dump of snow, and be back full coverage in 96 hours. So that's kind of a little bit about my history. I think, so now we're going to talk about what I was doing at MTA a little bit. One of the things I wanted to do was change the culture, and then I wanted to change the operations. So talking about changing the culture, believe in strongly empowering people. We did that. We worked hard, try to lead from the front, get out of your office. If you're a CEO, and get out with the crew, which I did a lot. It was very rarely in my office except for meetings, and then play the team. So we were launching something called Baltimore Link, and we all went through the polar bear plunge where we all ran in the water in the Chesapeake Bay when it was cold, to draw attention to the fact that we were going to launch a brand new branded service. We did rebrand our service. Here's one of our cool buses. We got Joe Flacco to agree to be our spokesman, the quarterback of the Super Bowl winning Baltimore Ravens. He came out, did an all-day thing with us, did radio spots for us. And, we wanted everybody to know about the change because all of our routes were changing. And so 250,000 people a day were going to be riding a new bus route. And so some people only read the sports pages, so we got him involved too. Then I went into a high end of telling people about what we were doing. So I had regular programs on the local television stations, on the news shows. We started our own radio station, the first FM station in America for a transit system. I've got a background in radio, so it was fun. And then we figured out how to make the service better. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But basically, the idea that most cities in America are looking at now their bus service, right? Houston started it off. They actually were kind enough and gracious to invite us to spend a day with them and learn lessons learned. So we changed all the routes in our system. We had 750 buses, 6,000 bus stop signs, and 65 routes. And we changed them all to some degree, some more than others. And we expanded the service, added new routes around the city, reverse commute routes, all kinds of stuff. We did a 2-year analysis prior to me getting there, and we figured out what needed to be done. And then we pulled the trigger and did it. And then we made sure we involved the drivers, which is something I learned from Tom Lambert down in Houston, who told me, Paul, make sure you get the drivers involved. And I'm glad he did, because we did what we called in-reach instead of outreach. And we had regular weekly meetings with our operators, our professional bus operators, who helped us decide where to turn and what would work well based on their experience. We had 4 bus garages, and we had committees at each bus garage made up of drivers and mechanics who helped us look at the bus stop signs. We did 6,000 brand new signs, really cool bus stop signs. We took them out, and they would, we looked at what would be good for them to see, et cetera. So we got them involved. And we also had to raise the credibility of the agency. So I spent a lot of time in Annapolis. Here I am before the Maryland Board of Public Works, the governor, the comptroller, and the treasurer, talking about paratransit performance improvements, which we went to when I left. We were at 95% on-time performance for our paratransit service with 10,000 trips a day and 1 preventable accident per 100,000 miles, half the national average. So we had a great team there in our paratransit service, Carl Parr and folks like that who did a great job for us. And then keeping it safe. Baltimore, as you know, is one of the most violent cities in America. But in 2016, we won the APTA Award for the Gold Award for Safety and Security. We had the safest major transit system in America with so many, I can't remember the number now, but it was a very low number of type 1, part 1 crimes per 100,000 passengers. So we had a great police chief there, a great police team, and keeping it safe was important. Then we got recognition. In 2016, I won the award, AASHTO, people know what that is, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. I won their top individual award, the President's Award. There I am with my boss, Pete Ron, who was Secretary of Transportation, a great guy. And then got, Cover Boy, Mass Transit Magazine, as I left that month, a great way to go out. So then I went to work for Trapeze, which is a really big transportation technology software company, fare boxes, ticket vending machines that works. It's a great company. It's worldwide. It's a Canadian-based company, but there's 195 major transit systems in North America with over 100 buses. We have our products in over 150 of them. So we're in about 3/4 of the systems. But I'm not there to sell. I asked them, the president of the company said, we want you to come work for us. What would you like to do? And I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to write, I want to speak, I want to travel and hang out with my CEO friends and help improve the industry. He said, great, do that. So that's what I'm doing, and that's why I'm talking to you today. So here's what I did down at this conference. We had 6 CEOs. We ended up doing a CEO roundtable. We'll do another one of these. Trapeze has their own conference called Think Transit in June, and we're going to do another one there in Nashville. If you're interested, you can look it up as Think Transit. So then Alex asked me to talk a little bit about a leadership topic, and this was a leadership topic that I spoke on around the country at various conferences. It's one that's very near and dear to my heart. I pulled it together. I'm an inductive thinker, so I like pulling things together. My wife, on the other hand, likes to analyze and break things apart. So we make a good team, the yin and the yang. And I always like to have people that work with me like that as well. But in pulling things together, I pulled together all these thoughts, and it came to me that in order to make really substantial improvements in a large organization, transit being what most of my background has been, but also local government, there's one thing that stands in your way, and it's the bureaucracy. It's the folks who have been there a long time who don't want to change the way things have always been done. And I don't know that you can break the bureaucracy, or even if you should break it, because you need them. But I think you have to bend them toward what you want it to do. And it takes 7 steps. So let's talk about it. I'm going to tell you what I came up with. After analyzing this, and then I did this at the MTA, and I've done it other places too. But the first thing I think you need to do in order to bend this back office bureaucracy of IT, finance, HR, procurement, legal, PR, these folks that become institutionalized in organizations, the operating line folks in transit systems turn over a lot, right? Because people are, if you're an operations manager in New York, you might get a GM job in New Orleans or whatever. So they move around a lot. You know who don't move around? The bureaucrats. Just going to tell you, they stay in their jobs a long time. They have a lot of times they're not part of the executive service, so they don't turn over with the administration. They have civil service protection. It's very difficult to move them out, and so they become this glue that holds the institution together, but also sometimes holds it down. So I felt like in order to help bend them toward excellence, which is what I wanted to do, I needed to give us all a North Star to row by. You know, the old sailors of old, they didn't have compasses. They would look to the north, see the North Star, and align the ship to that, and then sail toward that. And if the guys had to row down in the ship, they would be rowing toward the North Star. And so you need everyone to row toward the same goal. And so as a CEO or a manager of a component institution inside a larger transit agency, I believe strongly in starting out when you get there by instituting a new North Star or reestablishing the one that was there. So at the MTA, we had little coins done up, et cetera. There's a picture of one. We wanted safe, efficient, reliable service, safe, efficient, reliable transit with world-class customer service. And everything we did started to focus on that. I changed all of our staff training programs to make sure they focused on that. All of our key performance indicators will now be measuring the safety, the efficiency, the reliability, et cetera. Everything focused on those 4 North Stars. And everyone needed to be working toward accomplishing that. It also gives people a fixed point of reference. I believe in empowering folks, especially managers, to do their job and not to micromanage them. But they do need to know a fixed guide or a fixed point of reference. Like Stephen Covey said, you know, the farmer's out in the field. He's trying to plow straight lines. What does he do? He looks to the end of the field at a pole at the end of the field and uses that as his point of reference. We can have straight lines. Same kind of principle. So number 1 is to institute a new North Star or more. I had 4 of them. And then after we actually, I feel like, got the Titanic turned around or the ship turned around, then we changed it and we called them our 4 pillars, and we were building on them for the agency. But then you got to measure. You've got to measure your iterative progress toward achieving those 4 North Stars. So you want to make sure that you've got key performance indicators which can be measured as an agency, but also individualized. I was telling Alex Bond prior to this how that one of the problems I think that a lot of transit agencies do is they'll measure overall performance, like let's say on-time performance for a bus garage, and maybe you'll have competition between garages. If you have, okay, well, this garage has 78% on time, which is a national average for major cities, but this garage is 81, so you get the award this quarter for the best on-time performance. But we need to drive that down to individual performance so that people are held accountable individually for their performance after you have good, strong KPIs. And then you need to quantify the recognition of top performers. At MTA, we put together what we call the Superstars program, where we had regular monthly awards for operators and mechanics and everybody. We had, we looked at absenteeism, customer comments, preventable accidents, if they were performing well in the rodeo, and also individualized on-time performance. It would spur competition, promote the drive for excellence, etc. And people like getting awards. It's fun. All right. Let's see. There we go. Number 3 would be to build your own team relentlessly. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a lot of good people in agencies, and I think that they should be recognized and kept. But I think you need to bring in either folks that are already there or your own team to start with that are 3 things. Competent, meaning they can do the work that they're overseeing. You don't want to have a leader who the folks don't respect because they can't actually do the work that they're managing. You wouldn't want to put in the head of a shop who wasn't a mechanic, for instance. You'd want him to be able, or her to be able to go out and say, yeah, I can work on a transmission. I can change the oil. So you want to make sure people are competent to do the work that they're overseeing. Then you want dedicated folks, meaning people that are not clock watchers. You want people that are people of integrity who will do the work that's required, kind of, yoke up and move the cart forward, to switch the analogy around. And then you want loyal leaders, loyal to your overall goals as an agency, but also loyal to each other. And there's a lot of sniping that goes on when you are trying to improve an agency, because you are shaking people up. You're shaking people to the core, and some people are being chased out. And so you want people who kind of have each other's back. And so that's what you're looking for, in my opinion. Competent, dedicated, and loyal, in that order. And then you want leaders who buy into your vision and will work relentlessly to accomplish it. And then you reward them. So here we are at Ravens training camp. We did a lot of work with the Ravens, and they allowed some of our key managers to come out there. Now, here's a big one. I'm going to take a drink for this one. And it is water. The next one is to break up the power of the back office functions. You know what I mean by back office, right? It's the human resources office. I used to be human resources director for county government. Nothing against HR. I've been one, but I'm telling you, they're one of the back office functions that's important for an agency to operate. And then finance, the people that hold the money. IT. Information technology, I work for an information technology company. They often become the holders of the key to what can and can't be done in an agency. Public relations, too often that's driving the agenda of an agency. Legal, lawyers need, I'm a lawyer, so I can speak to this. Lawyers need to be reminded, they're not the boss. Lawyers are not the boss. The boss is the boss, and line management is the boss, and the lawyers, we're the client, they're the counselor. That's why they call them counsel. So you want their counsel, you want to make sure they give you the rules of the road, just like the other groups do, but they don't get to make the decision. And they don't get to tell me what I'm going to do. They can advise me, but I make the final business decision, just like in a corporation. You have to, the leaders, the operational leaders who are held accountable for the organization, the CEO, the COO, they need to be given the authority to make the final decision in consultation with all those folks, with procurement. And with equal opportunity office, and all those folks are all involved in that. But that's what I call the back office, the traditional administrative functions of an agency. What happens in many agencies, because there's turnover at the top, because a CEO, like at the MTA where I worked, the average CEO, well, I'll just put it this way. They've had 10 CEOs in 20 years. So you do the math, right? The average CEO lasts 2 years. I worked there a little over 2 years. But when you have that kind of turnover in an agency, what happens is a hardening of the arteries, which are the blood of the agencies, all this administrative stuff that has to go on an agency, they become hardened in how they do things. And there's reasons for why we do things, right? So you have abuse, and then you get regulation. Those regulations get enshrined so much to the point that sometimes we lose sight of what's our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is to serve the public. That's why we have to have that North Star as guiding us, because otherwise we end up serving the rules instead of serving the public. And that's the traditional definition of legalism. My dad was a minister, like I said, so there's a lot of legalism sometimes in organized religion, right? So you want to make sure you're focused on the end goal, which is to serve the public. So I believe that a new CEO or COO or somebody in power, executive director, et cetera, director, you need to take a look at that and say, do we have hardening of the arteries? Do we need to have an operation here, or do a bypass? Good analogy. I hadn't thought of that before, but so the goal is to break up that power that too often gets accrued, that unjustified power that gets to dictate the decisions to the line management and subverts efficiencies. What do I mean by that? Well, here's So football season ended a couple months ago, but those of you who are football fans know that, you know, the football field is so a certain distance wide, and then you have hash marks in the middle of the field, kind of designating the center of the field. So, you know, a famous coach once said to his running backs, "You're not doing your job unless you get a little chalk on your shoes." Meaning, the best running backs come to the side, run down the sidelines, right on the edge. They get further and faster. They're still within bounds. They're not breaking any rules, but not every play can be right down the middle. Or you end up like my team, the Washington Redskins, were in the 70s, where you just run down the middle of the field, one play after another, 1 yard at a time, lose, lose, lose. If you want to win, you want to move further and faster, you have to be able to navigate the whole field, not an artificially shrunk field that's artificially shrunk by the back office functions who are telling line management, no, 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 you can't do that. We tried that many years ago. It doesn't work. There's a policy against that. Well, who makes the policies in this agency? Does it come from the manager, the CEO, or is the policy, who has the power to change that policy? So what I did at the MTA was I just broke it up. It had accrued, the CAO position had accrued way too much power. IT, finance, procurement, all the stuff was under one person. And I remember the union president saying to me, "Paul, who's going to run this place? You or the CAO?" And I said, "I'm going to run the place." And so a way to do that is to simply put a check on that. I moved IT out. I moved this part of the agency out. We just reorganized the agency. Didn't have to do anything except to change the organizational structure. And it minimized and redirected that back office power center back to serve line management decisions. And then in some cases, those impeding progress had to be transferred, terminated, or their influence negated. A lot of people just left on their own because they saw that things weren't going to be the way they were. And then when you start doing that, you're going to find there are conflicts between new and old staff. So I think that you as the CEO, the executive director, or the manager of your business unit, you need to get directly involved in arbitrating those conflicts using a fixed goal as what you're shooting for. So you need to be able to arbitrate between the new ways and old ways of doing business and relentlessly push toward action over inaction. Again, this hardening of the arteries oftentimes means that major decisions or even minor decisions are held up for long periods of time because nobody wants to make a decision. And you need to empower your people, as long as they're focused on moving the ball down the field, to be able to make that decision. And then again, you need to be focused on your KPIs, your key performance indicators. Make sure you're moving towards those goals. Too many leaders simply allow conflicts to go on. And people end up spending all their time kind of, sniping at each other instead of focused on what we're trying to do. And so I'm a strong believer in not being afraid to get involved in conflicts between people and help them work it out. And then I think last couple ones is to champion a new all-encompassing project. After you're kind of shaking up the organization culturally, you need to have them focused on what we're working on. We're all working together for something. So in Baltimore, we had 3 big projects, right? We had Baltimore Link, which was what I mentioned earlier, our comprehensive, all-encompassing, change all the bus routes. They haven't been changed in 50 years. We'll change them all. We'll make them better, faster, stronger. $6 Million Man theme, for those who remember that. And we'll also tie the, hey, I got an idea. We have a subway system and we have a light rail system in Baltimore. Those routes were put in 25 to 30 years ago, but the bus routes were never tweaked to link in with the rail. Why don't we make our system actually connected? Baltimore Link. So we'll connect in the bus routes. So we created 12 color-coded high-frequency routes that run every 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and they all go into the central business district, and they all connect to the subway, to the light rail, and 2/3 of them were connected to MARC, our commuter train service as well. And then we did a bunch of other things like, bus-only lanes, 5 miles of bus-only lanes, transit signal priority, intersections, et cetera. And then, again, changed the whole look. Kind of, we still were the MTA, but our product now was Baltimore Link. And we, of course, many of you know about the Purple Line, a big project that we worked on as well, the largest public-private partnership in America, going on right now. It's a $5.2 billion, 16-mile light rail line that will connect in WMATA, Washington Metro, subway stations around Silver Spring, et cetera, College Park, going down to New Carrollton, with a 36-year construction and operation contract with a consortium of companies to operate it. And then we were also doing we got the $27 million federal grant to do the alignment of the new maglev potential line between Washington and Baltimore. And of course, now they're also talking to Hyperloop, which is exciting. And then finally, communicate. In order to bend the bureaucracy, you as a leader need to be out front communicating. You need to communicate externally to all your key stakeholders, the legislators, et cetera. For instance, in Baltimore, we made sure that we had regular meetings. I went personally to the Baltimore City Council and updated them on our new routes. And then we did up newsletters that had all the information on the route changes for each city councilman. And each city council person had a separate sheet of paper for their district that told them all the new and old routes so they could communicate to their constituents. As I mentioned, we started a radio station. We were on 10 social media platforms. I think you as a leader need to make yourself regularly accessible to solicit input from your employees. So I would go around every month and have a lunch with a town hall meeting with all the employees at a different garage. And then we had formal and informal ways to bring back comments to us. I made sure I told all of our employees directly from me what was happening through an employee newsletter. And then we wanted to continue to reward high achievers. So those are the ways I think that you can bend the bureaucracy. Hopefully you've learned something from that. If you want to continue to follow what I'm doing, just a little plug, a shameless plug for my podcast. I have a podcast called Transit Unplugged, where I interview transit CEOs. I believe we're the #1 CEO interview podcast for transit in America. We're going to make that category so small that I'm the only one that can be the #1. And but listen, seriously, it comes out every 15 days. We've got great CEOs on there who talk about their careers. They talk about their current projects and then transit trends. I do writing on paulcomfort.org, and you can follow me on LinkedIn. I've got 10,000 folks I'm LinkedIn with, and to put a lot of information out there, not just about me, or my company. I'm not a corporate shill. It's more about thought leadership and what's working in our industry. So anyway, that's a little bit about one ways you can improve yourself and improve your agency. Alex?
Thanks, Paul. And I'll give a quick plug to the podcast there. We looked at the list of who you'd interviewed, and quite a few of them, I'd say up to half, have been speakers that are transit courses in the past, and
awesome.
It's a great way for you to get updated on what's going on with people you saw when you were at So I guess my first question, and we would encourage everybody to type your questions in the chat box. I would like to hear from you too. I have a couple written down.
Sure.
And I think Aaron has at least one. Most people on the line here, not CEOs. How can they bend the bureaucracy? How can they help do that on their own, or even with their CEO, working alongside them?
Yeah. So if you're a manager, that means you're managing something. And so I would say that you work within the circle of influence, right? So your first circle of influence is yourself. So I would say the one way to bend the bureaucracy is to look at yourself and make sure that you're continually improving yourself, making yourself better. Make sure that you're reading books, listening to podcasts, improving your knowledge of the industry, and making yourself a better leader, right? We've all heard the analogy of, the two neighbors who were cutting wood, and one was looking over the fence, and they were both competing to who would have the most wood cut. And one guy was taking a break every 10 minutes. And at the end of the day, he had more wood cut. And he said, how are you able to cut so much wood? And the guy said, I was able to cut so much wood because every 10 minutes I stopped and sharpened myself. So you can get more stuff done when you keep yourself sharp. And then I think you can take those same principles I talked about, if your CEO will let you, and implement them in your own area of influence. If you are operations control center manager, you can use some of those same principles of making sure that you're managing the right things that you have up on the wall in your operations control center, where examples are what the performance is of each of the controllers. Or in other words, you're going to want to make sure you measure the right things. You don't want to climb the ladder of success your whole life, even in your own area of responsibility, only to find out it was leaning against the wrong wall. So you want to make sure that you're measuring the right things in your group. When I got to the MTA, they were measuring on-time performance for bus on a monthly basis and reporting it up to the management team on a monthly basis. You cannot make substantial changes through those kind of trends. You need to have daily and even hourly on-time performance updates so you can make real changes. So I would say use those same principles in that area. And then I know a lot of the CEOs in this business, and most of them are great guys and gals who are going to be open to this type of leadership style.
That's great. Thank you. Just real quick, are we able to post the slides here for folks to see later? Okay, we will do that. And by the way, this is being recorded. And for those of you who haven't logged in, there is now an alumni section of the Eno website. If you need information on how to get in there, let us know. We'll walk you through it. So this recording and others like it, there's a couple up there now. You can go see at your leisure in case you want to revisit Paul's presentation. I believe, Aaron, you have a Question
Yeah,
for
I did have a question. Hi, everyone. This is Erin Shoemate again. Well, I guess it's the first time I've spoken today. Paul, with an organizational change and structure change, there can be a lot of conflict, especially between the lower level staff. So I'm wondering how you keep morale up for an entire agency when you're doing that.
Yes. So again, I'm a strong believer in decentralized power. So if everyone is going toward the same goal and you've got competent, dedicated, and loyal managers that are working with you, you can allow them the flexibility to implement their own means. You're talking to them about the ends. You allow them to work on means as long as within the guidelines of what's allowable, and people become self-actualized. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What I found is that if people are only motivated by money, look, we're not doing this for our health, right? We're doing this, we got a job, we're making money. But if you can tap into people's ability to be self-actualized and to have their own vision, their own dream of what they've always wanted to do in their group, and you allow them to do it, that motivates them so much more. Look what Napoleon said. And then you reward them, right? Napoleon said, I can motivate my men more with a red ribbon than I can a bag of gold. And so I think making sure that you're constantly recognizing people for significant contributions above and beyond what's expected, and giving and empowering them to do it their way. They become so invested in that work that they can't wait to get to work, and they're working at home. My leadership team, you can ask them. They're all over the industry now. I'd be texting them at 2 a.m, and I expected an answer back. If they were awake, if not, I expected it back by 7 a.m. or whenever they could get it to me. But they were thrilled to do it. No one ever complained about that. No one, because they wanted to be part of what we were doing, because we were doing something bigger than just them, and that also motivates people, right? This is a little bit philosophical, but what's the number one need of the human soul? It is the need for significance. That's what we're all looking for at the bottom root of who we are. We want to be significant. And one way to be significant is to be part of something bigger than yourself, which is why now in America, everybody's got to have a cause, right? Whatever your cause is, you get all tied up. I'm telling you, a lot of that's tied into the fact that people are not satisfied at their work, so they find a cause or a hobby or whatever that they can feel significant in. You can create that at work and let people's vocation also be their avocation, where they're really interested. That's their hobby. They love doing transit. I've got some good friends who are doing that, and this is what they do, and so they stay motivated that way. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, maybe too much, but
no, and please go ahead and keep typing away in the chat box, the questions, and I have one, maybe my philosophical side. Bureaucracy isn't necessarily a negative thing.
That's right.
Right? It just describes the group of people that makes things function. So how can a bureaucracy be good?
That's good.
In what ways can it?
Yeah. A bureaucracy is good when it serves the purposes of the agency, right. When it serves the true end goals, and it doesn't get focused on atherosclerotic hardening of the way they're doing things, but it remains flexible and it remains focused on service to the public. So, for instance, we've got a lady that works in Maryland, Chrissy Nizer, who's head of the Motor Vehicle Administration. Great lady. And she has, what has the most negative connotation of any government group, probably in America? It's the DMV or the MVA. She has changed that in Maryland. It's become so much more responsive to the public, where you can almost do everything online now. And they've retrained all their staff to make sure that they're customer service focused, just like I did. Every group I've been really in charge of, the first people I trained, the receptionists, because they're the ones that were touching the public, and we wanted to make sure they all answered the phone the same way. They all had the information that they needed. This is another way bureaucracy can be effective. So if your frontline troops, the ones who are touching the public on a regular basis, like a receptionist, if they have a book or now online of all the important contacts in the agency, so they don't have to transfer them 3 or 4 times to get to the right answer, that is so key. And to be honest with you, giving them some more information than they traditionally get. Most frontline folks are myopic. They only have the information about their small area of what they're responsible for. If you give them an orientation to the whole agency, it makes them so much more useful in a sense that they can help the public. That make sense?
It does.
Good. So that's one way in which bureaucracy, if it's serving the end goal and staying focused on the end customer. Think about, I'll use an example. So another buddy of mine that wasn't my buddy before, but I hired and became a buddy, Glenn, was the CFO of the MTA. Well, he was, prior to that, the CFO of Safeway for the Eastern United States. And he had the right, the finance department at Safeway, what is their goal? Their goal is to serve management, to sell more stuff. And so making sure that the department that you're overseeing is serving the needs of the managers. So here's what he did. For the first time in a long time, in years, decades, I think, the managers at the MTA got monthly, what we call in the private sector P&Ls, what you call in the public sector a financial statement. They got monthly financial statements where they could see how much they were spending, how much their budget was, and it was a tool, I kid you not, that they had not had in years and years. How do you expect to hold them accountable for the money they're spending when they literally did not know how much it was unless they asked? And so those are the kind of ways bureaucracy can be helpful. Are there other questions coming in?
I think we want to get back to a little bit on the technical stuff.
Okay.
But I'd like to hear a little bit about what was the catalyst behind the Baltimore Link effort. But
Gotcha.
what this bus redesign's gotten a lot of positive interest around the transit industry. What was the catalyst behind it? Who were the big coalition members to make this happen?
That's great. So Baltimore, like most cities that are older cities, started out with trolley lines or whatever, and so the trolley lines in Baltimore City used to all go downtown, right? That's where all the action was. And so, but as the city grew, the jobs and the people became dispersed around the city over the last 50 years. But yet no one ever had taken on the task. I mean, they would change an individual route or a bus stop here and there, but no one ever took on the whole network. And so when I got there, our paratransit service was in shambles. So we had to focus on that first. We were under a lawsuit. It was not good. And so I hired a bunch of great people who came in and helped us turn it around, and we became a national leader within a year. But then shortly after that, I looked at our key performance indicators. After I got them reported to me, I was able to see that, hey, the commuter train and the commuter bus are running 98% on time. Golden, baby. Light rail, awesome. 92, 93%, not bad at all. The subway, 95% on time, meaning end to end, like most subways measure when it gets to the end of the line. But the bus service, bad news. Worse than the national average, that's all I'll say. And so it became obvious that needed to be changed. And then my buddy Kevin Quinn, who was the director of planning, said, Paul, somebody already did a study on this. It's called the Bus Network Improvement Project. We just never did anything with it. And there was thousands of pages of data. He gave me a briefing on that. I was like, I've been given a gift. I wanted to change the bus routes, and I knew it would take us 18 months to 2 years to figure out what we were supposed to do. We had all the data. So we just did that, and then we took us 18 months to implement, but we were able to do it. So what really drove us to make the improvement there was the key performance indicator of on-time performance and the overall negativity of the public. Remember that MTA in Baltimore had 380,000 passengers a day. 2/3 of them rode the bus service. So we had 250,000 bus passengers a day, and yet it was running the worst. And so our biggest service was running the worst out of all of them. So it was obviously, it kind of was like the elephant in the room, so to speak, that needed to be improved.
Well, thank you. I'll issue a last call for questions and make a couple of concluding comments, but type away if you have anything left. Just want to, first of all, thank you very much for being here and sharing your experience with us. I think you see a very unique style of leadership in Paul, and appreciate you taking the time and sharing that with us, and look forward to seeing it in print and also hearing it by podcast here shortly. Again, this is going to be posted on our alumni webpage, so please go sign up, and so we can stay in touch with you throughout your career, and check out our other webinars that we've posted up there. And again, also the slides will be available as well.
Good. Is there time for 1 or 2 more minutes for me to close out?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the future. So I've talked a lot about the past today, what I've done, and what we've done at various jobs I've had. But I want to talk to you, the folks around here, about the importance of transit, the importance of what we're doing. Too often, I think, especially, Nat Ford said this yesterday. I just came back from an APTA conference. He said, he had an editorial. Nat is the chairman of the board of APTA, and he's also CEO of Jacksonville Transit Authority, JTA. And he just had a nice editorial on Monday in the newspaper about him, which, as you know, it's very rare these days, and he's getting awards. And he said, look, I'm the one at the top getting all the accolades, but it's all because of the work of the folks who are here in this agency who are focused on, accomplishing his mission there. And I think it's important for us to, and for you, to make sure that that you are tying in the end goal in how you communicate to your staff for the future. What is it we're trying to do right now in transit? There's a lot of things happening in the industry right now, right? So you've got autonomous shuttles happening. You've got mobility as a service. Eno is a real leader, a thought leader in helping us kind of design how that's supposed to look in the future for America. But I'm telling you, transit agencies in North America right now are undergoing a fundamental sea shift in the role that we play in the community. And this is being commented on by all the major groups, and I've done a lot of writing and speaking on it now. We're changing from a utility model where we run the service like an electric company where it has a monopoly on the service and they're regulated by the Public Service Commission or any other type of public utility. Transit has been a public utility. It's changing now to becoming more of a mobility manager. And that is because we are no longer a monopoly. There are other players on the field of play now who, if we don't adapt, we're going to go the way of the dinosaur. I don't think we are going to go the way of the dinosaur because our leaders, the CEOs in this country are awesome folks and they get this. That's all they're talking about, to be honest with you right now. But we need to, you, the folks who may not be at the CEO level, who may be at the mid-level managers, need to understand what's happening. Your CEO, your board of directors is looking at what's coming next and needs to be prepared for that. You need to help them do that. You need to realize that the direction of what we're doing is now saying, okay, we've got the Lyfts, we've got the Ubers, we've got the Jitneys, we've got all these new entrants into the marketplace. We've also got new ways of collaborating with folks who are in mobility through, apps that are mobility as a service, which means more than just your bus and rail service are on your phone app. You've got other ways you can travel around. Consolidating all that with one app and then allowing people to do their own trip travel planning. There are new ways of collecting fares. I was just at this fare collection conference and led a roundtable on how do you figure out where you're going to land. You spin the dial or spin the wheel on are we going to do cash? Are we going to do mag tickets? Are we going to do smart cards? Are we going to do electronic ticketing? Or are we going all the way to RFID tags? Figure out where you're going to be or contactless cards. Here's my suggestion to you. Don't get stuck on the technology of yesterday, which is mag cards. Don't get stuck on the technology of today, which is smart cards. Think about the technology of tomorrow and make that what you're doing today. So you should be looking at electronic faring. You should be looking at all the things that are coming down the line. Autonomous shuttles, what's the best use of them? Listen, traditional public transit, although our ridership has been slightly in decline over the last few years, if we adjust our models and we don't just measure ridership as our only key to measure success, but we also adjust how we're doing things, we're going to be fine. And there is always going to be a role for traditional mass transit. But I do think we need to adopt what we're doing and be willing to consider these other modes and become more of mobility managers for a region. We're uniquely positioned to do so. And if you help your CEO, your COO, your CAO, your CIO, all that C-suite people, if you help them accomplish that by being a thought leader within your own agency, by taking what you're learning from Eno's regular monthly newsletter, weekly letter, and studying and bringing that to bear in your agency, you'll help your agency better adapt for the future and make sure that we are a meaningful component of life in America going forward. So thank you.
Excellent wrap up, Paul. Thank you.
You can tell I ran for office.
Yes. You sure you're not running again?
Yeah, no, I'm not.
So thank you, and thank you everybody for attending. I want to put a couple things on your radar. Our next virtual reading roundtable, for those of you who don't know, we're now doing a review of prominent leadership documents and having a discussion on them about every quarter. That's going to be on June 13th. And our next alumni webinar, that is scheduled tentatively for July 19th, and we'll be out with who will be on that very shortly. So stay tuned to your inbox. All right, thank you for attending, everybody.
See you guys.